Hi everyone, this is Stan. I'm with my mom, and we are coming to you from Williamsburg, Massachusetts. We're sitting just outside my Uncle Welly's house, which was Mom's brother, and we're going to take you on a virtual tour of Williamsburg, Massachusetts, where my mom was born and raised, and she's going to be our tour guide for the next few minutes. We're going to start at the north end, and we're going to go through to the south end, then we're going to come back and head and we'll have one picture from Northampton. So lots to come. Let's start with, where is it that you took piano lessons?
I took piano lessons in a farmhouse down the street owned by the Sylvesters. And she was a Smith College graduate, had majored in music, was the organist at church, and I walked all the way down and back.
And then between your house and where you took piano lessons, you would sometimes ski and skate in the wintertime.
That is correct. Okay, Grandpa Graves owned the land between our house and the next one, and there was a hill and there was a swampy area, and I could ski or I could skate. And I would come off the skate pond with frozen feet and stand on a furnace and get chilblains.
And tell me about the skis that you made, or skis that you wore.
Well, I'm sure they were handmade because they might have even used a barrel part or something.
Yeah.
But anyway, we didn't have anything that was very special, but enough to get us down the hill.
And then there's your house that you grew up in.
Yep.
What did you do for food there?
For food?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Dad had a huge garden, and he would plow it every spring. He'd go over to the farm and he'd get a pair of one horse, put a plow on the back, and then he'd let me ride on the horse while he plowed the garden. But it was a big garden. It had to be, because all the food that came off of it, Mother had to can to get us through the winter.
And you had animals too.
Yes. We had, during World War II, we swapped with one of the farmers down the street, and we got 2 pigs, Porky and Petunia, and they were slaughtered eventually, and we also had chickens. I didn't like having to go out to pick the eggs out of it because it was kind of a smelly house, but yeah, we had animals, dogs, cats, you name it.
And across the street was your Grandma Graves' house.
That is correct.
And at one point it was up against the hill, but they moved it, you said.
Yeah, they moved it from underneath the hill all the way down to the street. And the story went that my great-great-grandmother who lived there put a glass of milk or something on the counter, and she always maintained they didn't spill a bit of it. They had to put it on rollers and pull it down by horse teams.
And so the next house on our tour is your brother's house, Uncle Welly's house.
Correct.
Say a little bit about that.
Okay, that was owned by Mrs. Tilton, and I would walk to school from our house, and I'd cut across the lawns between my house and her house, and she wasn't particularly happy about the fact that anyway, we were really glad when Wellington bought it and made it his family home, and essentially it's set up like our family home was.
And then sort of back behind his house is the house that you were born in.
Yes.
And who else was born there?
All 3 of us children were born there.
But you didn't live there long after you were born.
That is correct. Mom and Dad bought the house 6 months after I was born, and came and moved over there.
And so heading down the hill into town is the school where you went.
Yes.
And what grades were on which floors again? All
right. First of all, there was no kindergarten in those days. Started with 1st grade, and 1st and 2nd were in one room, 3rd and 4th in another room, and 5th and 6th in another room, and 7th and 8th. They were all on the 1st floor. So for the first 8 grades, I was on the 1st floor. When I went to high school, that was on the 2nd floor, and there were 18 people in my graduating class. There were 14 girls and 4 boys.
And when you played on a couple of sports teams, basketball and softball, But for basketball, there was no gymnasium.
No gymnasium. The fellows, actually, I don't remember practicing outside with the girls, but the boys practiced outside. There were basketball hoops out on the out on the back field, and they had to shovel the snow off of them, and that's where they would practice until it got really severe, and the snow was too deep, and then they would go over to the town hall and practice in the town hall.
Nice. So heading across the street from the school is the parsonage.
Correct.
Who lived there and what happened?
Okay, the parsonage was owned by the church up until just a couple of years ago when they sold it. When I was in high school and college, Pilgrim Fellowship was held at the parsonage. And so I helped Arthur Rauner and Molly when they were in town with the Pilgrim Fellowship. But I had been a member of Pilgrim Fellowship all through high school. So I knew how it worked, and when I came home from college, I would help them with it.
And next door to that is the general store.
Yep.
But it wasn't always, the whole thing wasn't always a general store.
It was divided. The right-hand side was the post office, and the left-hand side was owned by a family and was a general store.
But you would stop in the post office every day.
Always, because my best friend, her father, ran it. So I'd go talk to him and check if there was anything in the mail in the box. Number 23.
And then next to the general store, there's two buildings, I feel like. One is like a town hall and one is
the Grange, and I think the Grange is still active.
Okay.
And then next to it, I think, was the Methodist Church that was then turned into the town hall, but we'd have to check the history to make sure that statement is right.
And it was in the town hall that people would sometimes practice basketball.
Yeah.
And
that's now the Historical Museum.
And is it outside of that there's the memorial for
the flood victims?
Gotcha.
Yeah, that flood caused a lot to change in the history of Williamsburg.
So moving along is the library, and you said you spent a lot of time there.
Yes, because, we didn't have internet, so we couldn't look up anything, and you had to go to the library to look things up. And it was always hysterical because the librarian would keep certain books underneath her desk and not allow certain people to read certain books.
I think I know what you're getting at there. Across the street going down the street from the library, you cross the river and then you come to the church.
Yes.
And the church was, in many ways, the center of the community.
The church absolutely was the center of everything in the community. That plus the educational system in terms of the school. So those two buildings were very important buildings because, they were the center of everything.
And your mom was active in that.
Very active, okay. There were church suppers that she ran. She ran the fairs that the church had. She helped with the choir and the music and taught Sunday school. She was very active.
And you were married in that church?
Correct. It's been the center of attention.
And there were a couple of baptisms there, too.
Oh, correct, Chuck. Both you and I.
And just down the street from the church, there's a couple of homes. One was owned by the owner of Marshall Fields or something.
Yeah.
And the other next door was
Dr. Hobbs.
And Dr. Hobbs, you were famous with Dr. Hobbs.
Well, I was the first baby he delivered after medical school. He was a graduate of Harvard. He went to medical school in Boston, and then he came here, and I was the first baby that he ever delivered. And because my dad had passed away when I got married, he gave me away.
Wow. And then sort of heading outside of town a little bit is where Stanley and Amy Ross were.
Yes.
What happened at their house?
Well, I walked from my house all the way down to Main Street and up to their house with a violin under the arm because I took violin lessons from her. And she had graduated from Oberlin, and she was the one who thought that I should apply and go to Oberlin.
And you named me after Stanley Ross.
That is correct.
So you thought
And
highly.
my brother.
Okay, so you thought highly of them for some reason.
Absolutely. I mean, I learned a great deal from both of them. Stanley Ross got me to read C.S. Lewis and things that I might not have read until I went to college. Okay, certainly not in high school. So you got the spiritual aspect from Stanley Ross, and you got all the
good looks.
Yes, from my brother.
And then coming down, sort of also on the north side of town, is your Grandma Packard's house.
Correct.
And you enjoyed going there.
Yes. That was a big house. It had a couple of stairways, so you could sneak up one stairway. You know, it was like 3 stories high, and it had all sorts of hidden corners that I really liked roaming around in that house.
And then coming back into town, I forgot the cemetery. Sort of placed in between Stanley Ross's house and your mom's house is the cemetery. And you would actually go there with some regularity.
Yeah. But families always took care of plots up there. It's probably one of the best kept cemeteries that you can go through because it's well cared for. But families spent a lot of time, not just Memorial Day, but making sure that, you know, they visited relatives, because in that cemetery are all the Graveses and a lot of Packards from, I mean, we're talking back the 1700s.
Wow.
Are buried there.
So moving past your grandma's house, we're back into town, and there's the grocery store, and your mom went to that grocery store for some things.
Well, she didn't have to buy a lot there because she canned so much.
Right.
So it was mainly just going for sugar and flour and that sort of thing. But you got to realize that the guy would stand behind the counter, and she had a list, and he'd take the list, and he'd go and get the cans of or whatever she needed. And then there were no machines to add them up, all right? And so he had a paper bag, and he'd write down the price of each thing and add it up, and she'd take it home.
And then directly next door to that is the gas station, which you didn't go to with any regularity at all. But
Not at all.
But there was a chance that your dad had.
Yes, he did want to buy it. Apparently it came on the market, and he was enthusiastic about owning it, but it didn't work out.
Now it sure is a scenic vintage station. Down the street from there is the house that Uncle Les lived in at first.
Yep.
And he lived upstairs and rented out the downstairs.
No, he lived downstairs and rented out the upstairs.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. And then next door to that is the building that was operated as a store.
Yes. First it was operated when Grandpa Packard and his family moved from Goshen down into the house on North Street. He ran a meat market in there. And then Les eventually took it over. I don't know when or how, and turned it into a place that had a soda fountain and certain things. And all of us worked there. Frostine worked there, I worked there, Pudgy worked there, you know. He
Obviously
hired all
Les and his dad worked there, so we can count at least 4 generations that worked there.
Yep.
And then just around the corner from that is the house that he later moved into.
Correct. Yep. Right opposite the high school. A very large, beautiful home.
And then just a little bit down the road from that is the garage where your dad worked.
Yes. From the time he graduated from high school, he went to work there. So he spanned an interesting history in terms of automobiles, because you're talking back in about 1917 or 18 that he would have started there. So he saw cars
Wow.
and vehicles develop.
Wow. And he would walk to work.
Absolutely. And come home for lunch and have a warm meal at lunch and have a quick power nap and go back and work. And they work 6 days a week.
Wow.
And they work 10-hour days.
Makes me feel like I've gotten soft, Mom. And then if you were to continue to follow the road, you head out of town and you get to Northampton, and you went there once a week.
Yes, Mom would make well, we only had one car in those days. Families didn't have multiple cars. So it was planned that once a week, she had her list and we would go down. And she put me into the dance classes, and I was there for an hour, sometimes 2, depending on if I had both ballet and tap or whatever. And she did her grocery shopping, and then we came home.
Wow, Mom, that is, thank you for taking us on this tour.
It's my pleasure to bring you up to date on what was happening in my lifetime.
It's been a fun project. Thank you so much for taking the time with me. I love you.